Hello everyone, welcome to episode 5 of the Kids Cancer Therapy Toolbox podcast. Today we will be interviewing Dr. Mario Capecchi. He is the 2007 Nobel Prize Winner in Physiology or Medicine and is a distinguished professor of biology and human genetics at the University of Utah. He received the prize for gene targeting experiments in mice embryo-derived cells to evaluate the functions of genes. The use of gene targeting in mice has modeled human diseases, allowing for the development and evaluation of therapies. Mario Capecchi was born in Italy, and his mother was imprisoned in Dachau during World War II. At the age of 4, he became homeless until being reunited with his mother 4 years later. Then they moved to the United States, living in a Quaker community in Pennsylvania. With no formal education, Mario began learning English and attended a Quaker school near Philadelphia. He attended Antioch College, studying physics, chemistry, and molecular biology. After Antioch, he attended Harvard University as a graduate student under the mentorship of James Watson and learned the process of science. After being part of the Department of Biochemistry at Harvard Medical School for 4 years, Mario moved to the University of Utah. So could you talk about your childhood upbringing and how did that influence you as a person and scientist?
That's a big question. I think the influence was primarily because my uncle, my mother's brother, was a physicist, and he was actually quite a renowned physicist. For example, he did mainly the development of the first electron microscope that allows us to see things at really small detail. And then he continued to do work, but he worked on something that he was not very happy with, and that's television. And there was no television allowed in our house. So he was not very pleased essentially with the way television is used as an educational tool, or maybe lack of using it as an educational tool. But anyway, so he was an extremely influential in my interest in science. But when I first went to college, I was interested in solving world problems. And it's obvious the world problems are solved by politics. So I entered political science. However, I couldn't find any science in political science, so I switched to physics. And I enjoyed physics. I mean, I loved the discipline. But at the time, they were utilizing experiments which used very large machines, which very large groups of people were running it. And I felt sort of lost. It wasn't individual. I like working with my own hands rather than simply, a bunch of dials and then 2 months later to be able to figure out what happened. And so, the school I went to at Antioch was really important. It's still remarkable because you spend, in fact, I encourage you, you spend half the time on coursework and half the time working. And the jobs are all over the world, and they're related to what you are interested in. If you're interested in theater, you will get theater jobs. If you're interested in science, you get lab jobs. And I was interested in science, and so I got to work in labs all over the country, in Boston and New York and Antioch itself and so on. And so I got 2.5 years of experience of working in the lab while I was doing my studies. So by the time I got to graduate school, I would really, I knew what, A, that I really liked it, 2, that I really was good at it, and that was going to be a future for me. And so here, it supplied direct hands-on interactions with what you want to do, and therefore you really evaluated whether this is for you or not. And I think that's an important decision. We spend, we live a long time, so you might as well find something that you really enjoy doing. And then it's play. It's not work. It's simply you're playing. I'm being paid to play, to solve puzzles for my living. And how could you beat that? Okay, and I can make up the puzzles. I can decide which puzzles I want to work in, and then somebody come up with the money, and then we can do experiments. That's an ideal life, and and if you get bored with it, then you can stop and work on something new. I myself, every 10 years, I changed to a different topic, completely. I worked in molecular biology, and then I worked in developmental biology, and then I worked in cancer biology, and now I'm a neuroscientist and working in neuroscience. So I just take off my hat and put on a new one, okay? And then decide that's where I'm going to go next. And it keeps you, this thing works if you challenge it. If you continually push it and say, this is really what I'm interested in, let's really work on this. If you challenge it, it performs. If you don't challenge it, it doesn't perform. And so you want to be always challenged, and you're learning new things, and that's challenging. And then at the same time, you're thinking about all new problems, and that's challenging. So I think it's and it's all up to you. You change when you want, and do what you like.
I like that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a nice formula, and people are sort of scared because they get into something and say, well, I never can work in another field. But I think actually being naive is an advantage, because you don't know the questions you shouldn't be asking. Everybody in the field knows what you should be asking, but you don't. Okay, so you ask all sorts of questions that may not pick up in other people that are working in the field, and so you always find a niche somewhere you can work, and you work in everything. Nobody else is working in that area, and you can just go with it. And right now we're doing that. We're working actually in neuropsychiatric disorders, anxiety, and anxiety is huge. I mean, it's just climbing all over the world. People are really anxious now, and so it's a good time to figure out what is anxiety all about at the molecular level, not simply superficially, but go deep and finding out how does it work. And once we understand how it works, then we can control it. A small amount of anxiety is terrific. Okay, it gives you drive. It tells you, to push yourself and not be comfortable, and then get beyond that point. Whereas a higher level of anxiety inactivates you, so it's bad. It becomes chronic and it consumes you. So it's very important to set the level of anxiety just right for the situation. And that changes with time. So you can't just set it in one place. It depends on where you are. If you happen to be in the woods and a tiger is there, you've got a few seconds to think about what to do, or else you become lunch. Okay? So there you have to do something very, very quickly. Other things can take more time, and you have to think it through and evaluate it and so on. So anxiety can just change all the time depending on the situation, as long as it's controllable. When it gets out of control, then it becomes chronic anxiety, and then it consumes you. So now that's what I'm on. So I've gone all the way from the beginning to the end.
Yeah. So moving back more towards the beginning, what were some of the challenges of moving to America?
I think I found it, my nickname was Cheerio, okay, because I was always smiling, compared to where I was, where every day you didn't know where the next meal was going to come from. This was heaven, okay. All of a sudden, everybody supplies you with food. I had no idea even how to eat, okay. Somebody would go to the table and they pass you a bowl of peas. I picked them up and started eating them, okay? Instead of taking a small portion and giving the rest to people. I didn't know that, well, I was given that and I'm supposed to eat it. So I ate all the peas for that meal. Nobody else got any. But, then you get accustomed to that. And I think, I landed in a really ideal situation. I went from no parents to having 65 parents in a commune. Okay, all the people lived in the same commune. They all shared the land with each other. They had jobs outside the commune, but once they're there, they were responsible for everything. And they worked together, and working together then you become close. Nothing brings you closer than working together, particularly if you're digging ditches or something, putting an electric line under the ground and so on. That's hard work, and you sweat, and you get to know your comrades, and there it is. And the commune, with 65 parents, we had enormous numbers of activities. All the kids, all the time, were busy doing this and busy doing this, making radios, going to Philadelphia Art Museum and studying art, and so on. So we had an enormous number of activities, all directed to the kids. And so it was beautiful. I mean, it was an incredible experience. And I think I needed something like that to be able to, when I arrived, I was an animal, literally an animal. I was living in the streets. What I wanted, I took. Okay? Nobody's going to give it to me. And so I had to take it if I was going to survive. And I became a very good thief. I mean, I was an expert because I studied the people and studied their patterns, and then would be able to predict when they weren't looking and take something, and then off I go. So but that doesn't get you anywhere later in life. So I had to drop those habits and then learn new ones, and that commune was a perfect place to do it.
Do you think you've applied that practice of having like a big family to your lab?
I think so. I think we become very close because we're all working. Everybody has their own projects, but we're all working in the same area, and that brings you together. And and I choose people from all over the world. I mean, at one time I had maybe 20 people and 14 different languages.
Wow.
All in this, all working together. Not only are they from different countries, but they also had different experiences and different backgrounds and so on. And that again, diversity is the key to everything. I mean, if we don't have diversity, we become stale. We become almost angry at each other. Whereas if we have diversity, we can see different solutions and different ways of doing things because you've had a different background, and you bring yourself to it, and I, coming from a different background, will bring myself to it, and in that way we share even much greater knowledge.
Yeah. So further along in your academic journey from when you first came to America, who were some of the most important mentors to you, and what lessons did they teach you?
I think, initially I had to learn how to speak. Okay, I'd never been to school, and I didn't know any English. And the teacher was very clever. They were studying Holland, and there's this butcher block paper. It's a big brown paper that comes in rolls and can be stretched. And so she put this butcher block all around the whole room. Okay, and so she said, paint. And we're talking about Holland, so so I'm painting windmills and ice skating and cheese and anything I could think of that was from Holland. It was being painted, and in the process, I was not only learning to communicate, but also learning English, because I had to name those things that I was painting, and then tulips, you name anything that is in Holland. And then at the same time, I was slowly picking up language. And at that age, this was when I was 9 years old, you pick up languages just like that. I mean, it's amazing. This brain is just equipped for picking up a new language. And in a month, I was talking English. Okay? So it's just very rapid, not trying, but simply doing it.
Yeah, learning by doing. Right?
Yeah. And that's a good way to do things. Learn by doing, learn by using your hands, rather than just thinking about it and sitting there.
Yeah. So what is your approach to explaining science to the public?
What's the what?
What's your approach to explaining science to the public?
I think, it's really important. And the reason it's important is because in the end, they support it. If people, everyone is excited about science, then they'll give money to science. And to me, science is the engine that drives the whole economy. It's the new things that are coming along that then take the economy and push it further. Okay, and without science, it becomes stagnant. You're just going to be doing the same thing over and over again, and people are going to get bored with it. And it doesn't matter what it is. People like innovation. They like new things. They like thinking about new things, seeing new things, and doing new things. So I think it's that aspect of it that I think is important, and we have to communicate that spirit to people who are supplying the money, or else they're not interested. Okay, we have to make the argument that science is important for their health. For example, with biological sciences, science is important for figuring out in the future what's the energy supply that's going to be being used. We can't use gasoline. We can't. That'll run out fairly soon. So you have to have new sources of energy that we can get. Sunlight, is there forever. So a lot of it's going to be based on sunlight. But there will also be other types of energies that people will come up with that will drive the nation. So I think, it's always evolving, it's always changing, and we need science to lead that quest, essentially, that search. And without it, we're doomed. And we make mistakes. I mean, there's no question that humans have made mistakes. We've wiped out many species that were doing something useful. Everything has a purpose. We have to, bacteria and so on work at a different level than we do, okay? But what they're doing is just as important as what we do, and they've been here a lot longer than we have been. Billions of years as opposed to hundreds of thousands of years. So a completely different scale. And so I think, and I enjoy science simply because it's new. It's always provides puzzles, and I love solving puzzles. And the more difficult they are, the more challenging they are, the more fun they are. And then, that time that you have a eureka moment when all of a sudden you see something that nobody in the whole world has ever thought about before. It's amazing. And that keeps you going and trying to figure out new things. And no matter what we choose, it's gonna, if we go into depth, we'll very soon exhaust what's known, and that'll all become new. So I think it's that spirit that created America, and that spirit that we have to continue if it's going to stay a habitable place. And now we not only have to think about ourselves, but we have to think, because we're all interconnected, we have to think about the whole world and how it interacts, and how we can't forget certain people and promote other people. That doesn't work. So I think it's there are huge numbers of challenges, and right now is for science is a difficult time, but we'll go through it, and we'll be stronger at the end, and having solved those problems. But the one thing we have to remember, nobody's going to solve the problems for us. We have to solve the problems. It's our job to solve those problems. It's your job to solve those problems in the future. You're the next generation, and therefore, we have to now hand over what we know. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. You filter through, throw out the bad, keep the good, and then we can continue. And you'll bring in new things that we never imagined.
Yeah. So, what was your biggest obstacle?
Your biggest obstacle is always yourself. You're your word. I mean, and you should be. When I often get my best ideas in the middle of the night, 2, 3, 4 a.m. And then I wake up my wife and start telling her, what I'm thinking about. And she's very patient, and she listens. And after a while, she said, "Go back to sleep." Okay. One reason I do that is so that next morning I remember what I was thinking about. And so the next morning, I try to tear it completely apart. And if I can't tear it apart, then I say, okay, here's an idea I shouldn't throw away. But if I can tear it apart, then I can forget about it. So it gives you, at that point, you have to be your biggest critic. It's important to, firsthand, really try to completely destroy that idea. And then if you can't, then it's something to think about. And also, I never say, when you have a good idea, you may not have the tools right now to be able to do it. Don't throw it away, just store it. Put it into something that you can keep it, and something may come along like gene targeting, which then allows you to do things that you previously couldn't do, and then you can continue. And even gene targeting is changing. I mean, we're just now doing some very nice changes to it, because it turns out that gene targeting, particularly the way it's being done right now, requires you to do a double strand break, because that stimulates everything to that spot. But it turns out that double strand break is a weak point, because it's promiscuous. It does breaks other places where you don't want it, and then all of a sudden you're changing things that you didn't expect to be changing. You're interested in changing this gene, but now you've changed gene Y instead of X, and so that promiscuity makes it dangerous, because gene X might have been important, and as well as gene Y. And so we want to be able to really be precise. And so the question is, could you actually do gene targeting without double strand breaks? And and something most people would say impossible. But if you put your mind to it, you can actually come up with a solution with it. And I think we have. So and that will remove essentially and make it much safer for doing things in the future. Gene targeting will be used not to figure out what a gene does, but to cure a gene that's defective in a child. And so then you want to be able to do that change. And the nice thing about gene targeting is you're changing the things that's effective. Often in medicine, we supply something in addition to overcome the defect, but here we're actually correcting what's defective, and that's likely to be the best solution.
Yeah.
So I think we always keep ourselves open, and we're never at the end. We can always make things better, safer, and more efficient.
So kind of going back to the Nobel Prize, how did it feel to receive that, and how did that change your life?
It's an accolade, okay? It's something that says we recognize that your lab has done something important. And in that, it's important because scientists, sports figures get all sorts of accolades, especially money. Okay? They make a lot more money than scientists do. But we do have a lot more fun they do, and I'm not killing my knees while trying to put a basketball into a little hoop. So I think it's that aspect that's important, and then I think it does change your life. I try to ignore it, and most of the things that it does. An example is now the university thinks I'm the perfect person to talk somebody into giving university money. Okay, because I can say, oh no, here, this is something interesting you think about. The U is working on these things, and you should be supporting it. So they started, the one thing that's the most precious thing that you have, and you only get the same amount, and everybody gets the same amount, is time. Okay, so you want to be the stingiest with your time, because you have 24 hours a day, no more, no less, and everybody gets the same amount. If you utilize it doing something productive, then you can be happy with it. If you utilize it doing something that is not productive, then and I agree that bringing money to the university is important, because it helps run the university. But on the other hand, it doesn't help my science. So it sort of diversifies what you have to do, and you do that because it's expected responsibility. But if I have my way, I spend my whole time in the lab because that's what I enjoy doing, and that's playing.
So what projects are you currently working on? I know you talked a little bit about
now we're working in neuropsychiatric disorders, and it is anxiety, and it's a huge problem. It's even worse for you than it is for me. Okay, that is, young adults and is probably the factor that are most affected by anxiety right now, worldwide, and I think they have a lot to think about because the world is changing so rapidly, and in many ways it's not, you don't see yourself as that things are going in the right direction. We have wars. We shouldn't have wars because wars are very expensive in terms of because they're very destructive. They're completely destroying things, and very little is gotten from wars. And then people die, and kids die, children die. People that had nothing to do with the war are dying. So it's not a good situation, and we have to get over that mentality throughout the world because the world it's very fragile. It's there, and we can someday twist it in such a way that it keeps going downhill as opposed to be able to recover. Right now, we do an insult and it bounces back, but how many insults can it stand? And we're getting better at doing bigger and bigger insults. So I think there is we are in a precocious situation, and the more we go along, people think about nuclear war. Nobody in their minds would think about such a thing, but actually this threat of nuclear war right now is greater than it has been for years. So I think because people sometimes get in a corner, and then once they get in the corner, they want to get out of that corner. They'll do anything to get out of it, even destroying, the whole world in essence. So I think, there is a lot of things that keep you anxious, and so we have to really learn how to work with anxiety productively, small amounts being good, large amounts being bad, and it's a disease essentially that's affecting everybody. And particularly, another things that's happening now is the migration of people going from one place to another, and nothing creates more anxiety than that, because you're breaking down the family structure, you're breaking down the community structure, and putting people in completely new situations which they feel anxious. So it is it's a huge problem, and I think we jump into things, and all of a sudden we see things that nobody else saw before. People, a population of cells that's very important in anxiety are called microglia, and they're the only cells in the body that are made outside of the brain and then actually migrate into the brain. Okay, and in the process of doing that, they're picking up information on their journey, and what the first contribution is that everybody believed there was only a single population of microglia, and they were saying, no, there's two, and nobody would believe it. Again, people are very skeptical, and that's good. In science, you should be skeptical, and so it's my, if they don't believe me, it's my fault that I haven't convinced them. Okay? So I have to figure out, why do we have to, and then maybe if they understand why, maybe they'll say, okay, now we believe it because you need them. And it turns out they work as a binary system. They're working with each other, and they're aware of each other. One raises anxiety, the other lowers anxiety. And together they set the point exactly where you need it, and it changes during your lifetime, depending on what's going on around you. We are machines that make ourselves, but are aware of the environment. We can see it, we can hear it, we can feel it. And so we have all these senses to tell us our proximity of what's really out there. And the brain is pretty good. I think it usually gives a pretty good advice as what's happening out there. Pretty good advice. This is a foe, this is not a foe. Okay, and you do those computations very quickly, and they're usually pretty good. Or else we wouldn't survive. If we were bad at it, nobody would be here. So it's an amazing force. all it cares about is that it works. Okay. Mother Nature, she doesn't care. She finds something new, she tries it out. If it makes things better, it's selected for it. There are more kids that have those particular genes. That's success. Everything's measured on how many kids you have, because that's essentially the medium that we're working on, and that nature works on. And that's now breaking down, because now social situations are actually much more important than biological situations in terms of forming how we think and how we operate. But I think it'll dial that in also, and make fairly good choices. But unfortunately, nature's pretty slow. It has to work within the lifetime of an individual, and now we require things in seconds. Okay, we turn on the TV and we see what's going on anywhere in the world just in seconds, and become appraised of what's going on. And that's a good thing, and it's a bad thing.
So, do you have a favorite area of study that you've done?
When I'm asked them, it's always whatever you're working on. That's the most exciting thing in the world. And then if you get bored, then you drop it and do something else that's even more fun. So, in science, yesterday doesn't count. It's always today and tomorrow. Yesterday is important because it tells you, what has been done, and you take advantage of that. But what you can change is today and tomorrow. And so the emphasis is always the future as opposed to the past. And so it has science has sort of a short memory. And it's good, because accolades are terrific, but they don't get you much. Okay, you put something on a shelf and then you forget about it. And what's exciting is what's ahead of you. So I think it's always what I'm working on is the most exciting thing. And if it isn't, then I'm working in the wrong field. So then it's time to change.
Yeah. In scientific approaches, when is it time to throw the broad net versus going long and deep?
No, that's probably the hardest decision. Is, are you just, don't you quite understand it, and if you pushed a little harder, you'll understand it? Or is it such that you need a new technology? Actually, when you see science, it doesn't progress like this, a smooth curve. It goes boop, 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 and all those boops are new technologies that come in that all of a sudden allows you to see things and do things you previously didn't know. That's why, if you want to make a big contribution, it's likely to be technology, because not only does it affect what you're doing, but it affects what other people are doing, because they can use your technology. When we develop gene targeting, we spend a lot of time thinking about how to make it easy for somebody else, not make difficult for somebody else, but easy, because if it's easy, they'll utilize it, and then people really will appreciate it and be aware that there was an important contribution. If I'm the only person that can do it, it's useless. Okay? You want other people to use your technology. And so, and that's how it spreads, and that's why science just keeps going, because new things come along. What I often ask myself is, what can I do? Okay, and then it says that shows that there's a hole that now it has to be filled, and you either have to wait for somebody else to fill it, or if you don't want to wait, you have to do it yourself and develop that technology that will allow you then to do the next step. So I think technology is what moves things, and that and we know we think we know a lot of what's going on in there, but we have actually almost no idea. I mean, the number of computations that are going on are just incredible. They're mind-boggling, and yet at the end of the day, it has figured out which ones are worth doing and which ones aren't, and put them aside. Okay? So it has to do this every day. And one of the reasons you have to sleep is because then at the end of the day you have to wash everything up. And if you don't do it, don't sleep, then pretty soon that clarification doesn't occur, and then you won't be able to actually function anymore. So sleeping is very important because that's the cleansing process for the brain. Every day it has to do it. It's a big job.
Yeah. So previously you made a mouse model of alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma, which is a childhood cancer. What inspired you to do research on that?
I mean, that's a good question. Right now, I would guess maybe Charles was involved in that process. And he's continued. He's done terrific, and he loves children's cancers, and he's good at it, and he has a nice new approach. I mean, he's doing science very differently from the conventional labs that are academic labs, and I applaud him for doing it, and he functions, and the difficulty, and I have the same problem, even though I'm at an academic lab. It's always getting money is what you spend a lot of time doing, and what you wish you didn't have to do. I'd be happy if somebody just gave me money, and then I could do it. But that doesn't happen with it. Money just won't come to you unless you find the right person that's sympathetic with what you're doing and encourages that. Right now and that's even truer now. I mean, now being in a situation where you're not dependent on that age is actually now an advantage because everything else that's going on at that age isn't affecting me. And right now, that's most of my money comes off from private sources, and so that's much more flexible. But it's also a lot of work. I mean, you have to find it and find somebody who's willing to do it, and that they see that what you're doing is worth doing to them, not just to And then an example is that often people, for example, who are the best people likely to give the most money in terms of cancer research are people that have cancer, or their siblings have cancers, or some family member has cancer. And so then the tie is there. They have a big commitment, and they'll support him. They support his lab. So I think it's you have to, but you can't. Nobody's going to do it for you. First realization of the world is, you've got to do it yourself. If you really want it to be done, you've got to do it yourself, and you're doing it yourself now. So that doing these kind of things is important because it is communication. It's this, and we have to reach your because you're the next generation. Okay, if we don't reach them, what I'm afraid of, what's happening now, is that people will now no longer go into science because they say, oh, it's so hard. I mean, why should I spend my whole time trying to get money to get a lab going when all I want to do is work in the lab? And so that'll disillusion people. But what I would like to argue is that, nobody's going to have as much fun because you are playing, and you are, in a company, if you are working in a company, then they have a product in mind, and so you better help make that product, or else the company folds. I don't know. I have no ties. Okay, I can work on anything I want, and if I'm bored with it, then I drop it and work on something else. Because at the end, all that's important is knowledge. I'm not making anything. I'm making things that other people could do that will be practical from it, in terms of medicine, for example.
So, it's been said that you've been or you've done a lot of work studying bats. So what can be learned from bats?
Everything. They are very, unfortunately I have to drop that money because I don't have money to support it. But it's still a great job. It's a great project, and it has enormous potential. And I have a blueprint essentially of how to do it. And it's still left there to do. I mean, bats, for example, bats, you can put anything into a bat, a virus, Ebola virus, and nothing they get infected, but no pathology. Okay, 3 days later, a human would be dead. Okay, so the bat knows something that, and nobody knows what the bat knows, but they can tolerate having that virus in their body and yet not die from it. Okay, so they know a lot about immunology, and so so that's one aspect of it. And then their sonar system is almost as good as our eyes. I mean, they can see a little insect flying around in the sky, and whoop, there it goes inside them. Okay, so that system, nobody really has a real good appreciation of how it works, and it's really accurate. Bats, you have a mouse and a bat. Okay, they're almost have the same heart rates. They have you can choose ones that have the same body size, so on. One lives 3 years, and the other lives 60 years. How could this thing live 60 years and a mouse only lives 3 years? Okay. So again, a bat knows something we don't know, okay? and that allows them to live that longer period of time. So there's one thing after another that differentiates bats from us, and nobody knows what they're doing. And here I have a blueprint of how to do that, but nobody's picked it up. So it's still an open thing. And what's important is, anybody can go in now and change a bat gene, but that's not good enough. Okay, what you have to do is have a program which allows you to genomically interrogate anything you want and to follow up there, because gene one isn't the whole story. Gene one by itself doesn't do anything, okay? Particularly if you take it out of the body, okay? It just sits there, okay? It's in the context of all the other genes that it's doing something. And so you have to not learn just what that gene's doing, but who's that gene talking to, and is it down-regulating that gene or up-regulating that gene? Under what circumstances? Because they could reverse under a different circumstance. So you need a systematic way of assessing all of the things that bat is doing, as opposed to just saying, okay, this gene does that. That doesn't help you much. So I think you need a systematic approach to do it, and that's essentially what we were proposing to do. And it's applicable to anything. Okay, I mean, what I'm amazed at, for example, you look at a whale and you ask, how many cells does it have? How many cell divisions does it have? And yet it doesn't have that much problem with cancer. I mean, the scale is way beyond us. Okay, it should have cancer all over it, and yet it doesn't. So again, a whale knows something that we don't know. Okay, and knowing that would help us. Okay, it's figured out a way of being enormous, having billions and billions of more cells than we do, and yet be pretty free of cancer. It's not a problem. Okay, so but the real take-home lesson is that whenever you look at any given organism, it knows things that we don't know. Okay, it doesn't matter what it is. It has to have lived to be able to survive in that environment, being it what it is, and then taking advantage of whatever is around it to allow it to keep going. So you could choose almost any organism you want and study it in detail, and you will learn a lot that you never knew before.
Yeah.
But no, the BAT project is a fun project, but it's still on the shelf.
I mean, it seems like a really interesting topic.
No, it is. No, they know so much. In terms of longevity, in terms of sonar, in terms of and just in terms of you being, it's one of the few organisms, vertebrates that can fly, and do it pretty successfully. And that has allowed, given it, that's allowed it to spread out all over the world. I mean, you go up to the North Pole, you'll find bats. You go down to the South Pole, you'll find bats. And along the equator, you'll find bats. They're all different, but they all have taking advantage of that particular location.
You mentioned earlier that you painted to learn English. Another thing is that your daughter is an artist. So is there an intersection between science and art?
Yes, very much so. And I think the creative process is quite tied together. And we often do operations that are quite similar. I mean, when I have an idea, I put it into a box over here, and I have a different idea, I put it in a box over here. And then what I do is start bringing it together. And at the interface, now there's something new, okay? And so I do that actually physically. I mean, I see it, okay? And an artist operates the same way. I mean, so they're using their canvas or whatever medium they are to then create something that wasn't there before. And so I think the creative process is very similar. And there's lots of artists in our family, and there are lots of scientists in our family. And that's not an accident. It's a similar process, just at different ends. And I think we can learn a lot from each other. I mean, I think it's, aesthetics is really important. I mean, we get pleasure at looking at a beautiful painting or a beautiful sculpture, and it gives us, and pleasure then in turn affects our disposition, which in turn affects how we work and create. So, so it's always a combination of those things. And I think, and I look at art a lot and try to figure out, what was the painter thinking about when they were doing that particular piece of work? What is she or he trying to convey? And in the process, maybe help me, decide. I always try to put things in fairly physical term. When I'm, the conversation I'm having are always with nature, Mother Nature. Okay? And it's a conversation of what, because she's had 3 billion, 4 billion years to do whatever she wants to do. So she's had a long time to figure it all out. We're just stumbling onto some of her tricks. And by understanding how she's done things, then we'll be able to sort of, and people, are always, and it may happen fairly soon. People will create life, and that's going to shock people. But it shouldn't, because nature has already done it many times. She says, no big deal. But I think we will be shocked, and philosophically we will be shocked. But I think that's inevitable, and so it's because it's not, in a sense it's complicated, but in a sense it's not so complicated. And so all the tools are there to do that.
Yeah. Where do you go to do deep work and create big thoughts?
That is, you never know when you're going to have a good idea. Okay, but if you're not thinking about it, you won't have a good idea. Okay? So what's important is to always be engaged and be open, and then you wait along, and all of a sudden here the thing pops, and you are skeptical, and you interrogate it and play with it. So I think you never know when you'll have a good idea, but you just have to be open for it, and then recognize it, and play with it. So I think it's unpredictable. It does, and occurs at very odd moments. But I often, one of the things I do with my students is I send them to a meeting that has nothing to do with what they're working on, absolutely nothing. But what I want them to see is what are tools are they using? What are they? How do they ask a question? What are and what questions do they put in front, back into each other, so that they see something completely different that may then be utilizable by your own self. So I think it's exposure. You always want to be open. Keep your ears, eyes, smell, eyes always open, except when you want to sleep. Then sleep soundly. But No, I think the creative aspect of it, I think you just have to be open. It's not that you can predict what you're going to. I mean, I knew more or less, for example, with gene targeting, I'd thought about it for a year or two before even, putting it in, writing about it or thinking about it. And then I slowly approached it. So I had the idea long way before it ever materialized. But so I think, and I think again, be really critical of yourself, and test that idea and keep hammering it, and then if it withstands your critique, work it out. Talk to it. It's also it's good to have people that you can trust, that you can then interact with and bounce ideas back and forth, and in that way progress, because no two minds are alike. So it's always a fertile ground. It's just to pop your idea to somebody else and see what they think about it. And they'll say, you're crazy, and then you say, oh, that must be a pretty good idea.
So you're a creator of technology, but how do you feel about technology such as smartphones?
Technology is neutral. It's not good or it's not bad. You can do good things. Any technology. You can do bad things or good things. So itself is neutral. It's you who then decides whether you're going to do good things or bad things with it. So I think my feeling is there's no such thing as trying to cover things up. That would be useless. You have to keep things open, but you have to have ethics in order to make a distinction of what good and bad is, and make sure you know what that distinction is, because you can always talk yourself into saying, oh, that's good, but when it may not be very good. So you have to look at the long term. I mean, and I worried about how people, are they going to do good things or bad things with gene targeting? And they did. The first attempts were awful, and they were, they took place in France, and they were trying to cure a particular disease on people, and by looking at it and thinking about it, you knew the outcome, and that's exactly what happened. All of them, they actually worked. It cured the disease, but they also just all of them died. 6 kids from cancer. Okay, so and it was a recipe for how they were doing it. They were going to choose cells that are really good at cancer, because they were just, they were working on growth. They wanted to make lots of these cells, so they were making the best grower, and it's going to be the best cancer cell that you've ever made. And sure enough, boy, I love them. Died of the same cancer. And so it's and that just is not thinking things through. And now they're much smarter about that, and so they're doing it right. But that set the field back probably 10, 20 years, because then after that they were shocked and saw, what we can do with that technology isn't good. It's bad. And so you have to make that recognition and not repeat that same mistakes.
What is your approach to mentoring, and how does one nurture curiosity in a young person?
What is
your approach to mentoring?
I think, it's, what my role is to set you up for you. That is, I want you to go to separate your own lab and then do things that you want to do. Okay, so my role as a mentor is to make sure that you get all of that information and technology to be able to do that, to feel comfortable in that setting. And I think, so mentoring is simply, it's not pushing, it's simply watching and observing and making suggestions here and there that may be helpful. And some of the suggestions may be bad. And and what you have to do is think it through and say, well, is that a good suggestion or a bad suggestion? But the one thing that is very important is never fear criticism. I mean, criticism is the best thing you can get. Somebody thinks enough about it to be able to give you an opinion. They may not be right, but you have to listen. Always listen to the criticism and then evaluate that criticism. But don't be afraid of criticism. I think often people, get heartbroken but get criticism because it's too close, it's too personal. But it isn't. Okay, it's giving you a choice of that information and what to do with it. So seek information. If I write a paper and you hand it back to me and say, "Oh, that's a terrific paper," nothing's gained. But if you go through it and mark it red in a lot of places, I have to look at it and say, okay, why did this? Why do you want to change this here and so on? And go through each change and see which ones I agree with and which ones I disagree with. But if I don't have criticism, then that paper is going to be terrible. Okay. You seek criticism. You don't run away from criticism, but you'll have the choice of whether to implement it or not, and that's your choice. Okay. So I think and a mentor's, that should be that relationship where I can be critical without offending you. Okay, I should do it in such a way that it doesn't offend you. That I'm trying to help you. So it's a relationship, and it's lasting. It goes way beyond the lab. It will go 20 years from now. You'll be still thinking about it. So I think choose carefully your mentor, and then always think of it as a two-way street. Okay? You're teaching him how to be a mentor. He's learning from you how to be a mentor. Okay? So it's always a two-way street, a two-way communication. And you want, if something goes wrong, it's usually because a communication gap. Okay, we're talking at different levels. We're not communicating, and I think, and the way you resolve that is even more communication. So you never fear about communication. It's always going to provide opportunities, and rather than restricting opportunities. So I think, and a mentorship should be that. I mean, and I know when you're ready to leave the lab is when you really start arguing with me. Okay, then I know you're ready. Okay, now you're ready to set up your own lab, because science needs this back and forth of communication, going back and forth and seeing, because there's no one way of doing anything. There's multiple ways of doing everything, but it's what's easiest and what's cheaper. And if you find both, then you'll be able to do quite a bit. The limitations are always, unfortunately, is always money. And in science, because of new inventions, it progresses, but it also always becomes more expensive. So you're going to need twice as much money as I use, and your students will need twice as much as you use. It's always a progression. You can do more and more, but it's more and more expensive.
Yeah. What advice do you have for aspiring scientists?
I think self-confidence is really important, because that's what carries you through. So I don't know where to give you, how you get self-confidence. I mean, the best way to, you can see it, particularly in students. As soon as they've done an experiment, it really works, then all of a sudden their confidence goes up. So I think it's going through progressions and having success with it that gives you the confidence to say, I can do it. Okay, and you can, and the next final realization is I can do anything. Okay. There's nothing limiting me except myself. You're usually you're the most conservative about what you can do, but the actual reality is you can do anything. I can jump from field to field and feel perfectly comfortable with it. I mean, at the beginning, you make mistakes, but But the beautiful thing is that you have all this literature that you can read. It's all there, and so it's all available. What's already known is there, and now is once you understand that, where do you go next? So,
Yeah, that's the end of our questions. Thank you so much.
oh, sure. Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you.
You're on a good track.